Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Paranormal Stories. First up, my girlfriend received a call from a ghost. By Blue Collar Weep 33. This happened back in October 2022, close to Halloween. My girlfriend, along with her friend, own a hair salon since the end of 2020. Hell of a time to start a business. They usually do Instagram posts, appointments, and everything related with social media with an iPhone that they only and exclusively use for their business. Since they were too close to Halloween, they decided to make an altar-inspired In the Day of the Dead on the salon. Context: the Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos, is a celebration in Mexico in which you put a stand with pictures of your relatives that passed away, along with food and offerings and things like that, because it is believed that your dead relatives come in spirit to taste the things they used to like when they were alive. Mine would have Red Bull and cookies. If you've seen the movie Coco, you might know what I'm talking about. Also sandwiches. The day they put the altar at the salon, everyone went home like usual. She came home and we did our normal routine. I went to sleep, and since she always had trouble falling asleep, she continued watching some series on Netflix. Somewhere around 2 or 3 in the morning, she wakes me up frantically. My first thought was that she'd watched some horror movie or something, but she couldn't even talk a whole sentence and was pointing at her phone. I hugged her until she calmed down for about 10 minutes, and then she started to say that she received a FaceTime from the phone at the salon. She said that she was watching the TV when she started to receive a FaceTime request. Since it was 3 in the morning, she thought it was very unlikely it was her friend, the salon co-owner. But since there were times in the past they'd stayed late to do material restocking, she probably thought she was there doing that and had an emergency. When she accepted the FaceTime, she only saw the ceiling. She started to say her friend's name, thinking she made the FaceTime, but nothing came on the screen. It was only the ceiling and the red light they leave on during the night. She started to get an eerie feeling and ended the FaceTime. Since they have security cameras in the business, she opened the app on her phone to see what was going on. At this point, she thinks that probably a thief has broken in. As soon as she sees the cameras, there's no one there. She puts the camera on reverse to see the exact moment when she was called, and you can only see the phone turn on by itself and make a FaceTime to her. That's when she lost it and woke me up. She said she can't explain the fact that the phone had a security lock that only her and her friend knew the password to, and also the fact that whoever or whatever was manipulating the phone picked her contact to make the FaceTime. There's no logic in that whole process. A day after, she showed everyone at the salon what happened, and everyone was in shock. There was no way that phone dialed itself at 3 a.m. Never heard of someone else receive a call from no one. That was the first and last year they had a Day of the Dead theme at the salon. Everyone got goosebumps every time they remembered what happened. Someone attributed it to the altar they made because supposedly you're inviting the dead to wander your place. 3 years gone by, but we still remember that night. Has anyone else had a similar situation like ours? Second story today is Weird Blob in the Woods by Old Crawdad. I grew up in the Appalachian Mountains, and while I have experienced several events that most people would probably call freaky or weird, I've always been a skeptic when it comes to paranormal activity, and I always had a reasonable explanation for every strange encounter, except for one. I'd love to find an explanation if anyone has any ideas. I'm all ears. The experience that I had, which I couldn't really explain, actually happened when I was an adult. At the time, my wife and I were living with our 1-year-old twins in a house that sat maybe 50 yards from the edge of a forest. As such, We were no strangers to wildlife. Deer, raccoons, opossums, etc. were frequent visitors. We had a dog, a big mutt named Zeus, who loved to chase those visiting animals back into the woods, just to return a few minutes later, satisfied after a certain dominance. One night, probably around 11 p.m., Zeus was outside, and he just started going bonkers, barking incessantly. Through a back window I could see him standing maybe halfway between the house and the woods, just barking over and over at the tree line. We tried to ignore it, but the babies were sleeping, and we did not want them to be disturbed, so begrudgingly I threw on some clothes and a jacket. It was late summer, but it was an unusually cool night. Grabbed a gun and a flashlight and went outside. I met up with Zeus behind the house, and he stopped barking once I stood next to him. I directed the beam of my flashlight into the trees to hopefully see what all the fuss was about. There were a couple of pairs of eyes shining in the dark, but that wasn't unusual, probably raccoons, and I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. I could tell by his body language that Zeus wanted to go in, but it seemed as though he didn't want to go alone. So the dog and I walked to the trailhead nearby, and we entered the woods. Zeus and I were no stranger to those trails. Usually when we walked them he would follow me, but this time I was following him. He seemed to be walking with purpose, so I figured he was leading me to whatever it was that caused him to start barking. We walked for maybe 2 minutes before he suddenly went head first into some thick underbrush off the left side of the trail that I couldn't really follow him into. I immediately lost sight of him, but I could hear him moving farther and farther from the trail, and I could see the vegetation moving as he went through it. It didn't take long, and he was far enough away that I could no longer hear his movements. After a few minutes of silence, I heard Zeus coming back to me. This time he was moving fast, crashing loudly through the brush. I put my light on the section of the trail where I expected him to appear, but it wasn't a dog that came out of the weeds. I should point out that my flashlight wasn't some cheap gas station pen light. This was a quality light source designed to illuminate large areas. I had my light directly on the thing, and, being only about 10 feet away, I did get a good view of it. But I can't exactly explain what it looked like. It was just this gray shape. Sorry, I don't really know what else to call it. The thing had no discernible head or limbs and was maybe 2 feet long and around 1 foot tall. Being vaguely cylindrical in shape, it wasn't touching the ground. It moved quickly across the trail in front of me from left to right and disappeared into the brush on the other side of the trail, and it was gone. Maybe the weirdest thing about that encounter was the fact that once it crossed the trail and entered the brush on the other side, it didn't make any sound at all, and I couldn't see the brush moving like I could when it was approaching me. Zeus returned shortly thereafter. He seemed fine. He wasn't freaked out or anything, and he no longer seemed interested in chasing whatever the grey thing was. I looked briefly for some kind of sign that might tell me what it was that I saw, but I couldn't find anything. We walked home, and Zeus didn't bark the rest of the night. I'm still not sure what it was that I saw. And the third story today is The Whistler and Other Possible Connections by the singer Z. Hello. I'm not really sure how to start this, let alone tell it, but I will try my best. I'm 19, female, and I've lived in the same house since I was around a year old, on the outskirts of a small farm town in Canada. My family has had their fair share of supernatural experiences, but I want to talk about and maybe get some clarification on the one ongoing thing that bothers me the most. I'm a middle child and I have 3 siblings. My older sister, who is 10 years older, my older brother, who is 7 years older, and my younger sister, who is 6 years younger. When I was younger, around 4 years old, I kept having strange experiences in our house. For context, we live in an area that has lots of indigenous and war history. As a child, my bedroom was in the basement. Nobody likes the basement. It's unsettling and creepy, even though it doesn't look creepy. There is the old laundry room, which is the only unfinished part, and as a child I was terrified of it. My playroom was outside of it, and I would always keep the door shut. I used to hear someone in there, a man that would talk to me. I'd have conversations through the door and freak out my mother and siblings. I'd call him John, and I don't really remember the conversations, just that they happened. That was the first weird occurrence. Around that time, I was playing in my bedroom, which faced the side of the stairs to the basement, but a wall blocked the side, so I could only see if someone was on the last step from my room. I was playing with my dolls in my room when I got the sense that someone was watching me, so I turned around. I saw someone peering around the wall sideways. I could only see their wide, piercing eyes, dark hair, and thick, dark eyebrows, as well as their hands holding onto the wall. My brother had similar features, so I angrily told him to stop and stormed upstairs to tell my mom to get him to stop trying to scare me. She told me to go back to playing and she would deal with it, and I did that. Years later, my mom told me that my brother never left his room, so it couldn't have been him. His room was on the top floor, and the living room, where my mom was sitting, was on the main floor. In order to get down to the basement, he would have had to pass her. To this day, he swears it was not him. I still remember the experience vividly, and it was extremely unsettling and almost sinister. Around a year or two after that, my older sister heard whistling and footsteps on the porch below her bedroom window. She was on the top floor, across from my brother. This is now my room. It was winter time, so my dad went outside to check, and sure enough, there were footprints in the snow. The police said that there was nothing that could be done, but suggested putting up cameras, as we have a large property. The whistling continued into the summer, when my parents and I went camping while my two older siblings stayed home. They were taking out the garbage cans one night when they noticed a dark figure hiding behind the neighboring cars watching them. My brother noticed it first and asked my sister if she saw it, and she just told him to run. We still do not know who or what that was. We don't have many neighbors, and this particular neighbor was just an old man who was asleep at the time. My brother was very into the supernatural, and as a teen he was playing with a Ouija board in his room. Whoever he was talking to told him that they have been in my mom's life since she was 12 years old. My brother did not tell her about this, and instead asked her when she first started using Ouija. She said she was 12. I know Ouija boards are a touchy subject and not super reliable, but I feel as though it is possible relevant information. Around this time, my younger sister was around 3, and she woke up screaming to the devil in our shared room. She refused to sleep in there for weeks. This same night, my brother had come home from his friend's house after a depressing experience on the Ouija board, where the spirits said they had hung themselves, and the air turned cold, and everyone using it suddenly felt nauseous and distraught. He admitted this to me, and ever since that night, he would regularly wake up with strange marks and scratches on his body. No, it could not have been the cats, as he slept with his door closed, and they were declawed. My older sister woke up to a man watching her sleep at the end of her bed with a potato head. She thought it was our father, and asked what he was doing in there. The figure turned and walked out. My father did not go into her room that night. Late summer. I was home alone with my girlfriend. During the summer, my family goes camping, and I am usually home alone, aside from my cat. It was around 10 p.m., and my girlfriend was upstairs in my room while I was in the main floor bathroom getting ready to shower. I was by the window, which is pretty much on the porch, grabbing a towel from the cupboard when I heard the whistling. It was clearly a male voice, but the whistling was a sort of song I had never heard before. It was very pretty and almost tempting. It stopped after about 10 seconds. I thought I was imagining it, and got closer to the window to listen, and it started again, except closer to the window this time. I bolted upstairs and told my girlfriend, who had no idea of the past history with the whistling. I called my parents, and my dad sent my neighbor from down the road to come check the property. And he drove out from the campground to check. There was nothing. The motion lights we had added were not triggered. The cameras which were facing the area in front of the window captured nothing. I was horrified. It was my first time hearing the whistling. I talked to my sister, and it was the same as she had heard. This would be around 10 years since she had experienced this. My mother told me yesterday that she first started hearing the whistling as a teen. I had no idea about this. She first heard it in a very stressful situation while she was hiding in the bathroom at her old apartment about 20 minutes from here. She heard it when we first moved into this house almost 20 years ago. She heard it outside her window when my sister did. Hearing this made my blood chill. My mom has not had an easy life, and has had tons of experiences of her own, but this one she had omitted to tell me until recently. I've always heard my name being whispered in this house, nowhere else, but chalked it up to old house noises. This has happened as recently as last week. It happened frequently this summer while my family was gone. My mother recently told me she experienced this and has been since she was around 12 years old. I have never told anyone about it in fear of sounding crazy. There's probably more that I'm forgetting, but since my mother told me about her hearing it since she was a teenager yesterday, I've been anxious and really unsettled. I want to know what this is and why it is happening. Is it a Wendigo, or a haunting, a demon, or is my family just crazy? I would like any possible insight or commentary, please. I'll answer any questions I can to help. And story number 4 is My Childhood Home Had a Mimic for Almost 20 Years, by Buttery Spaceman. I never thought to Google what this is until discussing it with my wife today, and strongly believe we had a mimic growing up. Reading some of your accounts of very similar events brought me to actual tears. I've told these stories to people throughout my life and have never forgotten it. It presented itself several times in the house over the course of many years, twice in very similar ways, and stopped after the final one. When I was young, probably 6 or so, I woke up late at night to see my mom cross by my door. My parents' bedroom and mine were next to one another at the time, with a bathroom across the hall. It was very specifically my mom. She had a specific nightgown. I called out to her, and it arched its back and contorted itself in a way I can only describe as like when a cat does it. I put my head back down and covered my head, and when I looked again, it was gone. Fast forward a few years to maybe middle school. I'm downstairs, home alone, and the power goes out in the middle of the day. The house was a bit older and had rattly drop ceilings in the basement, so whenever I was down there I could usually tell where everyone in my family was. A second after the power goes out, I hear a solid minute of what sounded like very heavy boots stomping around upstairs, and thuds and rattling as if things in the house were being dragged and thrown around. After it stopped, and I eventually went upstairs, there wasn't a thing out of place. The third physical event was another few years later, near the end of high school. I sometimes would doze off on the couch in the basement on the weekend, staying up too late. I woke up, looked over the back of the couch, and what looked like my dad was sitting at the family computer. The lights were off downstairs, but I could see him in the glow of the monitor. This was pretty unusual, as my dad was not really a night owl. I called out to him, and the same thing as the first time happened. I can only describe it as bristling and changing its posture to be deeply hostile, looking without turning to me. Put my head back down for a second to compose myself and try to get a grip and make sure I wasn't just freaking myself out, and make absolutely sure I was awake. Got back up and it was gone. I was not sleeping. I stood up and went upstairs after that and was up for a while. Last thing. Another few years ahead, when I was partway through college. I got home pretty late. The hallway near my bedroom was unnaturally, weirdly cold in one area, much more so than the rest of the house. I knew full-on something was strange, but tried to put it out of my mind and force myself to be rational. I got in bed and felt someone sit on the edge of the bed on the side away from where I was facing. Totally frozen in shock at this point, it put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Hey, wake up," in what sounded like my dad's voice, who was pretty soft-spoken and not threatening sounding at all. Mind you, I was not asleep at all. Shut up at this point, nobody there. That last occurrence felt sort of final in a weird way I can't exactly explain. I lived there full-time for another couple of years until I finished college. Visited for days at a time often. Then full-time another 6 months after a few years later when changing careers and moving back home from an out-of-state job. Not a hair out of place in that house ever again. I never told my parents about it. Just wanted to share it with you guys, having spent some time tonight reading other people's stories and realizing I wasn't alone in this kind of specific phenomenon. Why it presented itself in such a frightening way but spoke so gently, I have no idea. Freaks me the hell out thinking about it to this day. And the fifth and final story today is Joan Fabrics Went CT by Kitchen Rooster 11-2. I have lots of ghost stories. I've had to deal with them since I was small, but this story pertains to a place I worked for like 5 years, maybe less, back in 2004 until 2009. The first time I ever went into this store, it was a service merchandise, and I was between 5 and 7 and told my grandmother it was haunted. Now, the big Kmart next door, there was a little Chaser's Pizza on the far left wall. When I was little, it was right up against Joan's, and you could feel it was haunted. So upon day one of my job, I know it's haunted. I can feel it in the back of the break room. I know already that whatever there is watching me. I wind up on the floor cleaning really quickly. I just got lucky and cleaned the store real well without being told what to do, and was off the register. The back corner, you could feel it, but there were two feelings, like two beings. Stuff would move and fall off hooks and shelves, nothing too crazy. The worst incidents were 2 physical encounters and dreams I've had. I have been told I'm a dream walker, and I've always been able to communicate with ghosts while I slept if they wanted to talk to me. I'm not talking about dead loved ones, but the ghosts in the place I'm at. First crazy incident took place while me and my friend were closing, just the 2 of us. Usually it was 3 or more, so I was alone, out on the floor cleaning. I was putting away big rolls of home deck fabric, and I started smelling something burning. And the feeling that came from this burning smell scared me so horribly bad, like I just told my boss I wasn't cleaning or putting away another thing, that I did not care if I got in trouble. She helped me, I believe, and nothing else happened other than, holy crap, you could feel it. Then I had the first dream of an old lady sitting in the break room with a real old record player listening to ragtime music. She said something to me, but I don't remember. I immediately equated her to the smoke smell. Small things happened always. Then the next dream was a man, and we were in Joanne's, but there was an upstairs break room and a huge storeroom, and he told me that long ago that he killed his mother. There was more to the dream, but this was a long time ago now. One time I saw a soldier walking down an aisle fully dressed. Only he looked like he was from the 40s or 50s, and he just disappeared. I don't know exactly who he was or if he was related to my dreams or the store. The next thing is the craziest. This happened on a Sunday in August of 2008. I believe this is the date that whatever he did happened. It was a huge sale. It may have been the Fireflies sale, but it was huge. And the store was packed. I'm in the back corner of the store, and I help these girls I went to high school with, and they leave. I'm getting ready to leave when I hear an old lady yell, "Help me." I look all around and no one's there. I just figured it was a lady. Maybe she fell out of her wheelchair. They sounded very distressed. I looked everywhere. There was no one. So I start cleaning up these stupid chest things we sold. It's near the back, and you can see the looming dark clearance section, and I hear it again. Except this time, so does this dude who was shopping with his wife. We looked everywhere and there was no one. We heard it one more time while looking together, and that was it. I even went into these weird staircases we had in the back. They were always locked. I had to get a key. He looked at me and was like, "You got a ghost?" And I said, "No, we got at least 2. I left not long after this and haven't been back, not even to whatever it is now. I did a little research and found out the place was a junkyard. But I didn't look through the old papers to see if I could find an incident that matched my dreams. But if stores still stand in those lots, best to believe they are haunted. And others out there got some stories. Also, this was Waterbury, not Went. And that brings us to the end of today's video. Big thanks to everyone who allowed me to use their stories. Before you go, do consider signing up for my Patreon page, which is linked down in the description. $1 or more a month gets you early access to all the videos at once on Monday. There is also a link to my merchandise store down in the description, as well as contact information if you want to send a story in or any other contact, and various other links to social media. But for now, I'm going to head off, so until next time, thank you very much for watching, and take very good care of yourselves. Bye-bye.